When I first came across mindfulness, I didn't really get it. I had the Jon Kabat-Zinn definition of mindfulness: awareness that arises through paying attention on purpose in the present moment, non-judgementally. Later he added, in the service of self-understanding and wisdom. It's a big mouthful that describes mindfulness in action, but still leaves it wide open to misunderstanding. When I encountered the article 9 Things Mindfulness is Not by Dimple Dhabalia, I found it helpful to dispel the many misunderstandings about what mindfulness is. So here's my version. Mindfulness isn't time-consuming, but the more time you spend practicing each day, the faster you'll see the benefits. There's a formal practice and an informal practice. Formal is where you sit and you might focus on your breath, do the ABCD that you can download from the website, or the body scan, or loving kindness meditation. Informal practice can be paying attention to your feet touching the ground as you walk. It can be not picking up your fork or spoon for the next mouthful until you've swallowed the first. In this way, paying attention to the food in your mouth rather than diluting the experience with rushing and multitasking. Mindfulness is dose dependent. So regular practice is more important than anything else. Research shows that just 10 minutes of mindfulness practice per day, practiced for 4 weeks, has significantly positive effects on the brain. And that's exciting. Mindfulness isn't about stopping your thoughts, but it is about not believing them to be true or to in any way define you. My dad rang from Denmark. He wanted to know if you could stop your thoughts. I asked him to close his eyes and to count his thoughts between the time I said go and when I said stop. For the second exercise, I asked him again between go and stop to see if he could notice the beginning of a thought, in effect a thought being born. Afterwards, his comment was, it stopped the thoughts. In the first part of this exercise, you start to notice the quantity of thoughts, and in the second, you notice that thoughts become coy when you really focus on them. When you give them your full attention, they lose their potency. You also notice with both exercises that thoughts are just pumped out. You're not in control of what is pumped out, but through your attention, you can have some input into what the thoughts focus on. So if you think that you're failing at mindfulness because you still have many thoughts happening, you're not. However, if thoughts are racing and they have a strong, unhealthy, and negative texture, then feel free to interrupt them. You can do that by shifting attention to your senses, asking, what are the ears hearing? What are the eyes seeing? What is the nose smelling? What is being sensed by the skin? You can also place the hand over the heart and just reassure the body, dear body, it's okay. We're safe and all is well. The more mindfulness you practice, the more you're going to not be beholden to the thoughts, but see them as interesting arisings, just something that is happening that reflects habitual neurofirings. I found it really useful when I had wanted to change habits to remind myself when the yearning arises that is just a little old neurological pattern and not to be taken seriously. Mindfulness isn't a relaxation technique. However, relaxing is a side effect of practicing mindfulness. We often think of mindfulness as a relaxation technique, and it is, but that is just a side effect of becoming present, getting out of our head and away from the relentless focus on past and future. Mindfulness does not take away from anything. It is about taking responsibility for how you're traveling, interrupting unhealthy mind states while encouraging healthy ones. You can be mindful anyway, anytime. You don't need a special quiet place. However, it does help, particularly in the beginning of your practice. Mindfulness isn't about deep breathing. Paying attention to the breath is often used in mindfulness training because paying attention to the breath makes you present, and it is an easy anchor point for our attention. But how you breathe affects the rest of your physiology and your mind state. Paying attention to the breath can be an anchor point for noticing what takes us away from being present. The ongoing bringing attention back, focusing on the breath, is a way to strengthen our attention muscle. Mindfulness isn't a religion. Buddhism is more a science than it is a religion. Kabat-Zinn and others have been keen to remove all Eastern context from mindfulness, and no doubt that has helped make it as popular as it has become. However, mindfulness without the Buddhist context is poorer, as the insight that you gain from practicing mindfulness are expressed so beautifully in Buddhism. And having both the tradition and your practice brings a stronger potency. Ideally, you also have community to share your experience with. There is an invitation to take what you like from Buddhism, not to become a Buddhist, but to become a better what you already are, and throw the rest away. Mindfulness isn't woohoo. You don't need hairy armpits or incense burning to practice mindfulness. The practice of mindfulness is one of the most researched modalities for well-being, and it outperforms cognitive behavioral therapy and all other therapies in terms of increasing our well-being. You can see this a systemic review and meta-analysis of psychological interventions to improve mental well-being. It's also backed by neuroscience. This is simply because the Buddha based his insights on careful observation of reality, and as you know, science does the same, so they should match, and they do. Mindfulness practice, in one way, is about using our attention and awareness to change our brain, to change our mind. Naturally, if it weren't for neuroplasticity, the phenomenon that means the brain is always changing and it changes through what we pay attention to, then mindfulness wouldn't work. Mindfulness does not make you perfect. Unfortunately, no, only kidding. The other day, I shared a story on a session about me becoming very angry about 10 years ago. One of the participants said, "But you're supposed to be mindful." Practicing mindfulness doesn't mean we don't get triggered and does not mean we don't experience difficult emotions. It does, however, increase the chance that we'll catch them, know these emotions as ours, and then deal with them within ourselves rather than have them spill over onto others. We remain imperfect little beings on a life journey. Mindfulness makes it a little lighter, a little easier, but it does not make us perfect. We really are already perfect. Mindfulness does not make your life perfect, and it is not positive psychology. Your life goes on whether you do mindfulness or not. Sad and difficult things still happen. Mindfulness does not subscribe to beliefs like the universe has your back. It knows that only universal truths are wise. In other words, the insight has to apply to all human life, not just a few. And that statement will obviously not apply to the 44 million Ukrainians, or my sister who got epilepsy at 13, which totally changed her life trajectory, or the baby dying from starvation. Mindfulness observes the difficulty, the pain, the sadness, not to ignore it or to dismiss it, but to honor it as a human experience. In the honoring, the state starts to fade, leaving space for calmer and kinder states. Sometimes it can feel like we have many repetitious and challenging visitors, and other times there are delightful guests. Mindfulness isn't a flow state. Flow is being with. Mindfulness is observing what is arising, two parts to the experience. Csikszentmihalyi defined the flow state more than 30 years ago as a state in which people are so involved in the activity that nothing else matters. The experience is so enjoyable that people will continue to do it even at cost, for the sheer sake of doing it, is his definition. The flow state often happens when we have cultivated great skill around an activity that we enjoy. When we engage in the activity, we forget all about time, place, and our life outside the activity. We are 100% present, one with the moment. Mindfulness requires that we observe the reactive part of us, that we observe body sensations, feelings, and/or thoughts that arise. In flow state, we don't observe, we just are. The flow is not mindfulness. It doesn't mean that flow state is not lovely. It is just not mindfulness. Mindfulness isn't something you can do in theory, just like you can't learn to play soccer by reading a book. Mindfulness is not an intellectual concept. It's a state of being where we observe our reactive self as it interacts with the moment. That cannot be done through reading. It is an experience. Knowing about mindfulness is not the same thing as being mindful. Thank you for your time, and I'd love to hear your comments and thoughts on this. Till next time, thanks.